hope you are well. My name is Sebastian, and on this occasion, I want to share with you, with much respect and with my father's permission, this story that happened precisely to him and his sister when they were young. I repeat, I do it with all respect because it is a delicate subject that still hurts him, but the story is so shocking that it is worth sharing. Since he was 20, my father, John, had bought a motorcycle and learned to ride it because it had always been his dream to have one, ever since his uncle had one and taught him to drive it since he was 17. Then he saved up to buy his own. It was always his means of transportation, but from what happened, he has never ever gotten on one again, and he doesn't even want to see them. To give you the context of this story and how it all began, I must start by telling you about my aunt, my father's sister, who he says was always a very sensitive person. She was the youngest of 4 siblings and the only woman. She says that since she was little, she had an imaginary friend. She always talked to him, and sometimes she scared them. Well, it really seemed as if she was with someone when there was no one else with her. She also tells me that she detected bad people the moment she met them, and that she was almost never wrong. She simply had that sixth sense very well developed. She could feel or see things that average people can't. When she was 18 years old and my father 28, he no longer lived with my grandparents or any of his brothers, only my aunt. She says that one day my grandmother called her to tell her that she was very worried about my aunt. Every day that she came home from college, she said that something was following her, as if you were kicking her out. She said it was coming for her, and she got very hysterical, crying and screaming sometimes in the early morning. She started screaming that she wasn't going to be able to take it and things like that. My grandparents couldn't understand. She stopped going to college because she said that when she went out at night, she would go back to her house, and that faceless woman would chase her. She told them that she was very elusive. Sometimes she was many meters away from her, but when I turned around again, she already had her a few steps behind her. My grandparents called my father. Well, they didn't believe anything she said. They thought she had some mental illness and called her to ask for help. My father lived in Los Angeles and was also doing very well financially. They wanted him to go get his sister to take her to a good psychologist or psychiatrist, whatever was best for her. My father, being the oldest brother and the one who was doing best, agreed to what my grandparents were asking him. Although he says that deep down inside he did believe his sister because, as I told you, since she was a child she had been very susceptible to all those things. He knew that she could see or feel things that we can't. But he wanted to please my grandparents and of course help his sister. So my father asked for a few days off work and went for her on his motorcycle. They lived in Pueblo, Colorado, so it wasn't very far from Los Angeles. He got to her house and convinced her that it was best for her to be cared for and that she would allow him to help her. And since they got along very well, my father managed to convince her, and it's something that he still knows. He regrets. They left in the afternoon, and it got dark on the road. My father says that at first, his sister was calm, but when the sun began to set, she began to lose control. She began to say things like she knew she wouldn't make it through the night, that she felt that woman very close, and that she was already coming for my father. She couldn't keep driving like that, so she decided to stop at a gas station to buy her some food and calm her down because she was getting on his nerves. He says she was like disconnected from the world. She had a lost look full of anguish, and she didn't seem to be pretending. Everything she said she felt was real, and you could see it on her face, and no matter how much my father gave her words of encouragement to try to calm her, she wouldn't calm down and wouldn't stop crying. He let some time pass, and they got back on the motorcycle. They had little road left to get to the city, but his sister began to cry and scream, saying that that thing was already behind and was chasing them, that please speed up, or it was going to catch up with them. My father says that he looked in the side mirror and he could see a dark silhouette with a face that was too white and with holes in his eyes so deep and dark that he was running at an impressive speed a few meters behind them. My father almost lost control, and my aunt wouldn't stop crying. She didn't say anything anymore. She just cried non-stop and hugged my father, resting her head on his back. My father turned around to see if what he saw in the mirror was real and says that he didn't see anything anymore. But when he looked back to see, there was a tire lying a few meters away, and he couldn't stop or avoid it. They both flew off the motorcycle. My father ended up with a broken leg, but my aunt lost her life instantly. He wanted to go to where my aunt had fallen to see if she was okay. but he couldn't move because of his leg. A car that was passing by managed to see them and stopped to help them to call emergency services. But it was too late. She had died. To this day, my father continues to blame himself wrongly, but says that he knows perfectly well what he saw. My aunt was not crazy nor hallucinating, and he took it upon himself to tell everyone that his sister was telling the truth. If there was something inside what she had been seeing all that time, it was death that she knew would come soon for her. That is why she had started to act like that. I never met her, but I only hope that she is in a better place resting. I have to say that I do believe everything she saw before she died, and I also believe my father about that thing he saw in the darkness of that road chasing them. I cannot imagine the terror he felt, but no more than he felt with what happened afterwards. When someone tells you that they have a bad feeling, do not ignore them. Since my father told me that, I always listen to my intuition, and thanks to that, on more than one occasion, I have been saved from many situations in which my life could have been in danger. We do not know the potential of the human mind. If you're enjoying the video, please subscribe the channel for future videos, and like and share with your friends. My name is Patricio, but everyone calls me Pat. My friend Hugo and I want to share an anecdote that we consider to be completely paranormal. Many of our friends don't believe us, but it's real, and even though we wish it wasn't, it happened a year ago. Hugo has a motorcycle, and he's driven it ever since I met him. He's a very good motorcyclist because he travels to many places in the United States on it. In fact, he says that he prefers motorcycles 1,000 times over cars. One day, he called me to invite me to a concert where one of our favorite rock bands was going to be playing in a city about 3 hours from ours. He told me not to worry about lodging because we could go and come back the same night on his motorcycle. We were only going to spend on the tickets to the concert and what we consumed there. Of course, I told him yes, and I accepted to go with him because I was very excited to go to that concert. The day arrived, and we went on his motorcycle. Everything was fine. We left during the day and got there in time to get a good spot up front. The problem was on the way back. We left the concert at about 3 in the morning. Hugo came completely sober, of course. He was the one who was going to drive. I had had a few beers, but nothing out of the ordinary either. I was in my 5 senses because it wasn't very smart to drink too much and return home on a motorcycle. We were already on the road when suddenly we saw someone in the distance who was walking towards us. He was walking alone on the road but on the side. I said to Hugo jokingly, "Look, he already looks like a ghost." We both laughed, and he told me that he was going to pull over. I replied that he was crazy, but he didn't care. I told him not to do it, but he began to slow down anyway. As we were getting closer, we noticed that it was an elderly man who was wearing a hospital gown and barefoot. I said to Hugo, "Let's get out of here. This is not a game anymore." But he stopped next to the man and yelled, "Good night. Do you need help?" But the man kept walking without even turning to see us. It was as if he couldn't see us, or at least that's what it seemed, because he didn't even look at us. The man had already passed, and he kept walking straight. Hugo kept yelling at him, asking where he was going, that he needed something, but the man never turned around. He kept walking until we lost sight of him. Hugo wanted to go look for him, but I told him to calm down, that we didn't even know who he was and that it was too late, it could be dangerous. Since I saw him, I felt that something wasn't right. I just wanted to get out of there and get to my house. Hugo listened to me and finally moved forward. But about half a kilometer ahead, we came across something that almost made us lose control. There was an ambulance overturned on the side of the road. We saw 2 people on the ground and the driver, who was still inside the ambulance because he had his seatbelt on. My friend and I were in shock. But the scariest part was when Hugo asked me, "Pat, isn't that the man we saw pointing ahead?" I answered yes. The man was on the side of the road. His body was spread out on the ground, not moving. Then we saw several ambulances and a patrol car arriving. It seemed that someone had already reported the accident, and they chased us out of there. They told us to move forward, but we managed to hear when some paramedics said that the 3 bodies on the floor were no longer alive. My friend and I began to cry. We had never seen dead people, and much less a spirit. When we were able to get to my house, Hugo stayed with me that night, but we couldn't sleep. We did not stop talking and thinking about what had happened. We wanted to find the explanation, but there was none. We do not know where the soul of that man went. Maybe he was simply lost and did not know where to go. This is what happened to us just a year ago, and although time has passed, that scene is still in my mind. It is something that you are not prepared to see, and unfortunately it happened to my friend and me. I only hope that man, I hope he rests in peace. I would feel very bad if he were still lost on that road, looking for his way home. I hope you are having a good day or night. My name is Iker Daniel, and I am 24 years old. I have been a motorcyclist since I was 18. I always travel from the city of Seattle to visit my parents in the city of Victoria on my motorcycle because I have been living here with my partner for some years now. I almost always travel alone because I don't like to risk my girlfriend. Due to how dangerous the roads have become thanks to crime, I usually travel at night because that's when I like to do it the most. The silhouettes of the mountains around in the dark are somewhat imposing, but it's something that I really like to admire. Before this, I had never experienced anything paranormal on these roads, but I thought a lot about traveling at night again. After what happened to me, I was on my way to see my parents. I left around 9 at night on the highway. My favorite time to start traveling because the traffic is very calm. But when I was already on the highway in the middle of nowhere, and where there was Monte Plano, that is to say, there were no mountains, I decided to stop to do my business because I could not hold it in anymore. I parked my motorcycle on the side of the road and went into the woods. But while I was doing my thing, I heard footsteps stepping on the branches and some grass was moving. They were being manipulated by something that was coming, walking among them. I hurried to return to my motorcycle, but when I raised my face, I saw something that made my skin crawl all over my body. Between the branches, the head of a black goat peeked out, but its eyes were very red, and it looked like it was smiling. I didn't know what to do. I stood there stunned for a few seconds because I thought that if I moved, that animal would run after me, and that was the last thing I wanted. So, I began to take very short and very slow steps backward without turning my body, looking all the time in front of that animal or whatever that thing was. And while I was doing it, that goat began to get up on 2 legs. This really happened, and I can't explain the terror I felt when I saw that. I stopped for a moment and stopped taking steps backward because I knew that thing didn't like me doing that. It was so imposing that I really felt lost, cornered, and with no escape. I knew very well that it was not a simple goat, not only because of its horrible and unusual appearance, but because it began to take steps on 2 legs. That was when I couldn't endure any more. I decided to go out and run as fast as my legs allowed me towards my motorcycle. But while I was doing so, that animal began to make an endless number of noises and groans so horrible that I began to scream for help by pure inertia because I knew that there was no one there. There were not even cars passing by. I was completely alone in the darkness of that mountain, and I knew perfectly well that if that thing caught me and took me, no one would ever notice. I had to fight to get out of there alive. I ran and got on my motorcycle as best I could while that thing moaned, and I heard its large and noisy steps running behind me. I finally started the motorcycle, but while I was driving, I noticed that animal was running next to me through the mountain, but its eyes and sad smile were what stood out the most, as if telling me with its face that it was going to catch me. I don't know how I managed to keep driving. Maybe it was the adrenaline I felt at that moment. Until finally, I saw that a car was coming from the opposite side. It was a double-trailer truck. When the truck passed me, I turned to look at the mountain, and that thing had disappeared. I don't know what started it or why it disappeared and let me go, but I thanked God and life because I had already thought I was dead. I arrived home hugging my parents because I thought I would never see them again. I told them what happened to me, afraid that they wouldn't believe me, but even so, I had to tell them. I needed to vent and let them know why I had arrived like that. I told them that it was okay, that they didn't have to believe me, but I had to vent. But my father stopped me, telling me that they did believe me. He also told me that the body of that animal had most likely been taken by some demon because in those places, criminal gangs perform many rituals to have protection. Perhaps that demon had taken the body of that goat to be able to manifest itself, and that was why I had seen it that way. The truth is that I was shocked just to think that a demon had appeared to me in the middle of nowhere and had chased me. Who knows what would have happened to me if it had reached me? It's something I will never know, but I live to tell it, and I wanted to share it with more people who may have experienced or seen similar things and let them know that they are not alone. There are more people who have had the misfortune of having seen that kind of indescribable things from memory. Well, that goat or whatever that thing was, I still see it in my nightmares.